competitive with sports and stuff like that, but I never stretched, I never warmed down, I never sitting cross-legged was still something that not necessarily that I struggle with, but I have limitations in that area, without a doubt.
That's Brian Malone, and this is episode 6 of the Yoga Life podcast with me, Kevin Boyle. Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I have with me Brian Malone, another in-house studio guest. Brian is a yoga teacher at the YogaHub. He also teaches on the teacher training. Brian's areas of expertise are handstands, pranayama, breathing, in which he's trained under Wim Hof. And he has an interesting approach to his yoga, one that's very accessible for all levels. And he also has quite a silky voice, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. All right, Brian.
How you doing, Kev?
Good man, how are you?
I'm very well, very well.
Thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Brian, where do we start? How did you start yoga?
So, I started yoga when I was living over in Australia. And it was just completely by chance. I was moved into a new house. I was in Brisbane at the time. And moved into a new house and just happened to be like right around the corner from a yoga studio. Mm-hmm. So I've always kind of been into keeping fit. I was very sporty as a kid and stuff like that, but I've never been into the gym. It was just, going to the gym and going through a program and stuff like that was just never really captivated me in any way. So when I was over there, I was just looking for different things to keep me fit, playing a bit of football, going for a few runs and stuff. So went down to try a few classes with my older sister who lived there at the time as well. And just something about it just clicked with me. I'm never too sure exactly what that was, but because I was terrible. Like if you imagine the stiffest, disconnected, I was worse than that. Yeah. Even the concept of touching your toes was alien to me. But I remember after one of the first classes that we went to, walking home with my sister, she lived in the area as well, and just saying that I think I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Yeah. Not, but just to practice. Yeah. I think this is going to be something I'm going to do forever. There was just something about it just kind of, clicked and stuck. And I just kept going.
How long ago was that?
Would be coming up to 6 years ago now. Yeah. 5-6 years. Yeah.
And what style of class was it?
It was flow practice. Mm-hmm. And I always think I was very, very lucky that just in that studio that I went to, 10 Toes Yoga, which isn't there anymore, but there was 2 American teachers they were traveling in Australia as well, so they were teaching at the time. And they were just genuinely amazing. Amazing people, amazing teachers, real teachers I would consider, they were knowledgeable and caring and patient, which they kind of needed to be. It was a lot of newer people in the studio and stuff like that, and they did beginners focused classes, they did slower paced classes. Mm-hmm. And Trevor and Amanda, I always sometimes wonder if it hadn't have been for them, if they hadn't have been at that studio, would I have taken to it quite as much as I did. But I loved their classes, I loved their practice, and I learned so much. And still, as a teacher now, there's things that I learned in those first few months of practicing that I still use in my classes. Wow. They were amazing. Yeah, really, really good.
So where did because you're kind of known for your handstands, where did that all come from?
That came, for a long time I was actually resistant to handstands. I suppose my first interest in the physical side of yoga was flexibility. Yeah. And handstands to me, I always thought it was hipster yoga. I didn't understand the big deal. I thought it was very visually focused and stuff like that, which they are in a way. But so when I started working at the YogaHub, I don't think I'd started teaching there yet. Katie Coldrick, who is one of my favorite teachers, really, really amazing, and she was teaching handstand workshops, and she was saying, "Oh, just come and see what you think." And started practicing them, not particularly consistently, and even then wasn't super obsessed with them. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who didn't do yoga, but he was kind of into handstands, so we'd kind of mess about together and stuff like that. And then I think it was when I started to kind of understand them that they became... There's just something about handstands that I find that when you kind of work towards it, it's this weird sort of... I just find them sometimes scientific in a way, because you can sort of feel the force of gravity a little bit more. You can kind of really feel that kind of connection that's trying to draw you down.
Yeah.
And you're aligning your body in this way that you shouldn't really be able to balance, but you can.
Yeah.
And there's these moments where it feels weightless, it feels effortless.
Yeah.
And that to me, that's almost like a form of meditation for me. That moment of just interplay, and there's still movements and you're adjusting and you're mentally figuring out, but there's a focus that I find really, really calming, really therapeutic. Mm-hmm. We're going to a workshop with Dylan Werner one time, and he was talking about handstands and the shapes, and he was like, ideally I would love to be able to train people to get to a stage with handstands where they just close their eyes, and it's not about the image, it's not about the shape, it's just your eyes are closed and you're in this position.
Yeah.
And it's something I love to do in regular classes, just get people in the pose, close the eyes, focus on how it feels more so than how it looks. And I think handstands can be a beautiful intersection of that. It's just, there's just something about it I find really, really, centering almost.
I was listening to it's interesting you're talking about it as a very centering thing, and a calming thing, because
not always, but it can be.
yeah, because when you look at it, it looks so spectacular and very it doesn't look very, like it should be very calming. But I know what you mean about, it's almost like if you try and force it, because I can be quite impatient with myself. And for example, I went to the park this morning and I was an hour and a half practicing handstands, and it can be a frustrating journey to do.
Sure.
And it's almost like you want the end goal, and you want to skip the process almost, just to get that line. I wonder, it seems to be so popular in these handstand workshops, people always want to attend, and people are always asking about handstands, and on Instagram it looks very spectacular. But I was listening to Jason Crandall on his podcast, and he said that most people will never do a handstand, and the ones that do, it takes them like 5 years of training. What do you think is the biggest challenge that people face in that journey?
The first thing I try to teach people anyways is just to let it become more of an organic process. Like you're saying, like people will chase this shape and this line, and I think, obviously I can't say for sure because I'm not in their body, but even when you see these highest level handstanding people and they look still and they could look like they could hold it forever, there's still movements and adjustments, and I think to get comfortable with that is one of the biggest things. A lot of people feel like when they start to move towards a handstand that there's a small shift or a wiggle, or that's it, it's over and you're just going to fall. And I think you can play with the balance in a lot of ways and let it be more of a fluid process. And if you eventually get to that straight line, awesome, but to let it be fluid and organic to get there, it's one of the things that I really don't like. And I see benefits of teaching this way, but I also see negatives to it, where you will go to a handstand workshop and there'll be about 4 people standing around one person, all holding different body parts just to get them into this shape of a handstand. And then they might for a second like let go and be like, oh, she's falling, grab her again. And I don't think that's the way to learn. I think the way to learn is practice is the biggest thing. You have to practice consistently, but to let it be organic, get comfortable being on your hands, get comfortable upside down, get comfortable with the movements. And for me, handstanding, I've learned so much about my body through learning how to handstand. Even outside of a handstand shape, I've learned so much about my hands, my shoulders, my core, my legs, my balance. And to look at it as a learning process, I think is a really good thing. But Paddy, I think he's got a shout out on your podcast before.
Paddy, double shout out.
A regular feature, insights from Paddy. Because he's a phenomenal handstander as well. He's like truly amazing. But
he's our Irish Patrick Beach.
He really
he is. The way he
really
presses
good.
up into them is phenomenal. But
I remember talking to him about it before, and he says the struggle about it is to teach handstands. That people are like, oh, I want to learn how to handstand, and he's like, well, are you prepared to like do drills, you know, every single day, which might not feel like a yoga practice, or might not feel that to, like, you know, and if you're not, then you might not ever handstand. Like if you're going to just throw yourself up against the wall every now and again, it's not really going to happen. But I think I really do think it's such an amazing thing to learn how to do. Like if anybody listening feels put off by the prospect of consistent practice, it is an amazing process to do that consistent practice. It's frustrating. Like I've kicked a few walls in frustration at like not being able to understand why I couldn't, you know, it's not a straight line. There's days that are worse than others, and it can be frustrating, but I really do think it's a beneficial thing. It's a lovely process.
And I think it's funny what you say about someone like, say, Paddy, and he's like, I would regard as an intellectual. He has a very philosophical mindset. I mean, he studied philosophy, and I think in order to work through the process of handstanding, it's so much mindset. It really is, compared to a lot of other yoga postures. And one thing it really teaches, I find, is courage, because obviously there's a huge element of fear, and so it's that play of having a bit of courage to do something that has an element of danger, and also it's very childlike as well. I mean, you'll see if you were walking down the street and you've seen a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old doing a handstand, you'd be like, oh yeah, no bother. But if you've seen an adult doing it, you think, what are you doing? But doing movements like that, although it's you know, a gymnastic movement like that, it kind of brings out the child in you, you know, and that thing of you get a bit of a buzz from it. And I think it's really important to put across to people that maybe don't do yoga, that not all yoga is calming. not all. I mean, I just finished my yin teach training, and yes, that's very calming. But even within, there's parts of it where you feel maybe anger, frustration, and I think when you're as a yoga teacher, people expect you to always be calm and very tranquil. You know, if you swear, they're kind of surprised and this type of thing. But I think part of yoga, in terms of the emotional side, is experiencing all the spectrum of emotions, and that's what I mean, experiencing them as opposed to reacting to them. You know, like today, for example, in the park, I was doing my handstands and it was very difficult, but I accepted it as opposed to beating myself up about it. And I think that's a massive. You can learn a lot about yourself through that.
I really like the idea of. I don't think this has to be consigned to yoga, but I think yoga is definitely a beautiful way to approach it. That to look at the physical practice. First of all, we kind of like map out our bodies. It is a kind of a process of mapping. So you start to understand how the body works with certain movements, where you hold tension, where you can improve, where you can soften, all these sort of things. And it's this, like a mapping. You start to kind of just understand your body a bit more. And then when you start to understand the physical body a bit more, I think you definitely begin to understand the energetic body a bit more, your reactions, how you might push yourself in certain ways that isn't necessary, how you might be overly soft in certain ways which might not be particularly beneficial. And so you start to map on the energetic to the physical, and then that can, if you wanted to, take you then even deeper. And I think but always the most important thing with any yoga practice is to have that slight distance, that you're not, like you said, not caught up in the reactions, but you can observe them, that you're doing something physically, but you're not just slightly observing how this physical stuff is taking part on a separate kind of plane, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Participatory observation.
Is that it?
That's the word that I always come back to.
Okay.
In my practice and teaching, that you're participating, you're doing things, the things that you do are important, but to give yourself the space to observe what it is that you're doing and how what you're doing actually makes you feel beyond the physical is for me the most important thing. That participatory observation.
I'm stealing that one.
Yeah, I stole it as well. I don't know where I heard it from, but I stole it as well. But it's a beautiful way to approach it, I think. Yeah. And that's what elevates a handstand to something more.
Mm.
You could practice handstands as something purely physical and get a lot from that, but that process of observation just can transform into something completely different.
And you can take that off the mat as well. I mean, I used to suffer from road rage quite a lot. You know, and that's part of me trying to work with being more patient. And you know, for example, today when I was cycling down to get my breakfast, a guy cut me up, and it was like I was watching it happen as opposed to it happened to me. I didn't take it personal. So the principles you learn on the mat or on the grass as it was today, you can take them off the mat, you know. But you know, in terms of the physical side, so when you do a workshop and you do the marketing for it, or on your Instagram, there's loads of handstands, and a handstand is really spectacular, right? It's something beautiful about it. As you said, it looks like you shouldn't be able to do it. It's that line, and you know, and there's the beach in the background or whatever. but and the good thing about having images like that is it brings you eyes, brings you attention. So people maybe think, oh, there's a workshop, but maybe the downside of that is people look at that and go, I can't do that. Therefore, if I go to this, I feel out of place. So one thing, we had the conversation a few months ago. You know, your handstand is very smooth, very impressive, but you were talking about your physical limitations, about your external rotation of your thigh, for example, sitting cross-legged. So how do you navigate that with students if they're thinking you're like can do everything, but then you find sitting cross-legged challenging? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. No, I think I'm not a super flexible guy. Like I said, I've been practicing maybe 6 years, 6 years, and again, if I was to look at yoga as a process of mapping, I'm having to remap from 25 years of like paying no attention, not no attention, but not the kind of conscious attention that I'd be paying to it now. And you know, like I played football and I swam and I was competitive with sports and stuff like that, but I never stretched, I never warmed down, I never paid any attention to my posture. I never got massages. I didn't have that kind of care of my body, other than using it as something to do things with, if you know what I mean. So yeah, like certain things now, like I'm sitting cross-legged was still something that, not necessarily that I struggle with, but I have limitations in that area, without a doubt. But
But those limitations, sorry Brian, let me interrupt you, but I think one thing you said to me, which you were the first person to say this to me, and it was reconfirmed in my Yin teacher training by Josh Summers. Our range of movement is ultimately defined by the shape of our bones. And I think that's so important for people to know. Who, myself and yourself, we teach yoga for a living. It's our full-time job, but I find sitting cross-legged really challenging, you know. And people, when they think of yoga, they think of someone sitting in a lotus pose, you know, effortlessly with a flat spine. So yeah, would you like to expand on that, about the bones and how you learn about that?
Yeah, well, I was a similar thing from doing a Yin training and from certain other people that I've been kind of listening to at that time, that, you know, your bones develop. Well, certain things can be like genetic. You will be born a certain way. Yeah. But as you grow up, your bones and your body will develop in relation to what you ask it to do. If you are a dancer from the age of 3 upwards, if you're a gymnast from the age of 3 upwards, you will develop a bone structure, more than likely, not necessarily, but more than likely, that will lend itself to a wide range of movement. If, like me, from the age of 4 upwards, I played football, I swam, a lot of linear movements, they're not going to lend itself to, at 26 years old, being able to sit in lotus pose after doing a few weeks of lotus. It's just not going to happen. I feel myself opening up a lot more, particularly in the last year or so, but I don't expect to ever sit in lotus pose. I don't know if I ever want to either, to be honest.
Yeah, I know, that's so important.
I've listened to so many older yoga teachers with knee problems and hip problems and ankle problems from sitting in a pose like lotus for a long amount of time. I sort of feel like sometimes my limitations have been a small blessing, that I'm not able to pull my body into mad shapes, so I don't have to deal with the disadvantages of pulling my body into mad shapes. But in terms of how to approach that from a teaching perspective, sometimes I feel as a teacher your hands can be tied, because I feel a lot of times a student on their own process of mapping their body has to kind of learn things on their own, not in the sense of that you can't give them really good tips and alignment cues, advice, but they kind of have to also learn it through their own practice, through their own kind of self-awareness and focus. And it's one of the things that I think you could have the most amazing teachers in the whole world, but if you're not willing to take that introspective journey yourself, you're gonna, I don't know, there has to be that kind of two sides to the coin. So I
take responsibility essentially for your own practice.
Responsibility, well, not even responsibility, is in a like, you know, I'm not gonna just wash my hands. Teach yourself, mate, will you? But I think as a teacher, it's really important not to get overly caught up in, I want this person to feel exactly what I feel and to know exactly what I know, and more be, well, guide them along the path as best you can from what you know, but to give them the space to figure it out themselves as well. Which I think is really important. Because I know myself in my first few years of practicing yoga, if someone had this, you know, oh, listen to your body, it doesn't matter if you can't do these things. I didn't even really know what listening to my body was at that time. And it's just, I think if you are willing to go along that path of the introspective journey, although I hate that word journey, but I think if you process, I think is nicer. Okay. But, I think I've lost the point here a little bit, but I think encouraging the self-reflection it is just as important as knowing amazing anatomical detail or alignment cues or the best drills to get you towards a handstand. I think just keep practicing, keep listening, and eventually stuff like that will start to come. I think.
But I think when you say listen to your body, I think you can pull that a bit closer towards you. I'm a bit like, you know, when Joe Rogan's like, pull that sucker closer. So these move. We're referring to our microphones. Yes. Anyway, so when you talk about listening to your body, I know what you mean. That those words don't mean much to someone who just started yoga. But I think as a teacher, there's a responsibility to educate people on what feelings are. So, for example, if you're in a lizard lunge or dragon in yin, with the front leg that's forward, there's going to be compression in that hip flexor. The other hip flexor is going to be tension or opening. And just telling them that this isn't tightness, what we call tightness, and that associates with being a bad thing. This is compression, and that's a good thing, because it's like you're getting a massage, but you're massaging yourself, as opposed and differentiating, most importantly, every single sensation and then pain. So what I've learned from yin is to say to people, any sensation you're feeling is good. It's fine. It's good to feel a sensation, to be in your body, especially if you've been at a desk all day. The only sensation that's not good is pain. And an advanced yogi is someone who recognizes that, can back off and not work through the pain, because it only is going to get worse. Referring to what you were saying about people maybe sitting cross-legged, maybe some people who did that thought the pain was just part of the process, you know, no pain, no gain. But as they say in yin, no pain, no pain. That's what Josh Summers says. But I think that's so important, that people think yoga, I get a lot of CrossFitters coming to my class, and they're like, they train hot yoga particularly as their stretching day or their rest day, but they don't realize that you can get badly injured in yoga. And I think that's really important for people to know, that especially in hot yoga, because you're being warmed from the outside in. And knees, hips is a massive one. In terms of you mentioned that last year you're kind of you've become more flexible. What is that through doing more yin, or what's that from?
I'm not too sure exactly. I think it's just maybe a natural progression of consistent practice over a number of years, eventually the body will start to open.
Yeah.
I started to introduce some like mobility stuff, which kind of helped.
Yeah.
But I would really put it down to just consistent practice.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the key.
Definitely.
And I was seeing a bodywork guy for a while, because another one of my issues is that I have a really weird body, just naturally. I have my kind of whole rib cage is slightly like displaced, and I have this just weird, so like slightly twisted torso, which kind of leads to a little bit of an imbalance in my pelvis, which is not something I can necessarily fix. It's just anatomically I'm just a little bit weird. I think I've started to understand that a bit better as well, which has sort of helped. But anyway, seeing a bodywork guy about some of these little things, just finding a little bit more balance. And he comes from a yoga background, a martial arts background. Mark Cleary, really, really great guy. But he was saying that he has seen it happen in his practice and with other people, that with consistent practice, and as you learn and listen, there will be a moment where the body will just let go of certain things. He was telling me a case of a friend of his that had certain knee injuries, and so his body had to protect the knee, had tensed in like hips and hamstrings and all this sort of stuff. And he said that literally one day his body just seemed to let it go, and sitting in the cross-legged position, his knees just dropped to a lower position, and he just felt a comfort. And he said he broke down into tears.
Wow.
That it just, his body had literally just let go. And I think that's such a huge thing. I think that's why yoga is such a beneficial practice, is that work with the nervous system as much as with the physical body, or to understand that interplay between the nervous system and the physical body. And I think I'm understanding that a bit more through breath work, through meditation and stuff like that, that you can let go of a lot of stuff by literally just letting go, not by stretching and pulling and twisting. By consciously communicating with your body. I think it's a really amazing thing to be able to do. And I think that's where, but again, I put it down to consistent practice. Name dropping a lot on this podcast, I think, but talking to Adam Hustler.
Yes, this is good shout outs.
I was at a class of his in London one time, and it was funny actually, because it was recently after I'd done a yin training, and I was talking to him about yin and this listening to your body kind of thing that you get, that is encouraged in yin. And he has a slightly different approach where he's like, oh, listen to your body is good, but your mind knows a lot as well. And sometimes your mind knows a little bit more than your body necessarily does, or that your mind can guide your body in certain ways. But he said again that only comes from consistent practice, from taking that time on your mat to begin that process of listening. Which there's no great secret. I think just consistently giving yourself that time is the most important thing.
Well, I'm glad you said about the breath work, because that's something else that you know when you're very interested in. Before we go into that, what was your Wim Hof experience like? The legend that so many names being dropped all over the shopping.
But I think, to be honest, and just before we get into the Wim Hof stuff, with all the people that we're mentioning, to really, one of the things I love about yoga as a practice is the ability to learn from so many different people. And to be a magpie and to pick up and to see what works best for you, and to learn all these different approaches. And even though it is a very individual practice, you can just learn so much from so many different people. And I really feel it's like really lucky to have had the chance to learn from all these people and to pick up all this stuff. It really is amazing. There's so many good teachers out there.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Josh Summers Josh Summers is saying how he's a massive fan of jazz, and he was saying there's a jazz player called something Terry, I forget the name, but his saying is imitate, innovate. I think it's 3 I's, but it's basically imitate, innovate, and that's a natural process. That if you just copy, that's imitation, but if you add your own spin to it, and that's a natural evolution. So I think that's really, really important.
And something actually, because I think you said you've been doing it in classes recently as well, which I think is kind of important as a teacher, is to sort of tell people why you're getting them to do things. And I think that's something I've picked off of the best teachers I've learned from. They've actually told you why they want you to do something, rather than just say, okay, now we're going to do this pose or this movement or this transition. To actually explain the reasons why. And I think it gives people then that opportunity to kind of internalize and embody what they're practicing in their own little way.
Yeah.
Which, so to kind of like encourage people to not necessarily imitate, but to take from what you're trying to teach. Yeah. Rather than just we're in a room practicing together. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that takes, well, 2 things. 1, self-practice, regular, consistent self-practice, and 2, confidence. Because it takes confidence to stop a class, say for the inversion part, and go, these are your options. You can do this, this, and this. These are the different things that I'd advise, and blah, blah. Because you're public speaking then. You're really like, you're off script, as it were. You're not in the flow. But the other thing is, if you can only, I feel like you can only do this in an authentic way if you regularly practice, because I notice when I say things like, I was doing this yesterday, and what I found is if I turn my hand out slightly that way, it allows my shoulder to rotate. And then when I'm talking like that, which I try and do every day when I'm teaching, I notice people are looking at me, they're way more engaged than just like, and do this, and do that. And, it's more real. If you treat people like the way you'd like to be treated, as in, I'll say, if you choose to practice at home, you can add this in instead of doing this, and that makes it a lot more real. But yeah, Wim Hof. Because I love Wim Hof, and if you don't know who Wim Hof is, shame on you. I think I started with knowing about Wim Hof through watching his Vice, the Iceman. Vice Iceman documentary. It's like 45 minutes on YouTube. I highly recommend it. But you actually went away somewhere.
Yeah, I did like a weekend with Wim.
Okay. Just you and him.
Just a weekend with Wim. Yeah. I can't remember exactly where I first came across him. But I had heard of him, and then a guy who comes to one of my classes in the studio at Malahide. He's Richie, an absolute lunatic, but very open, eager to like experience kind of guy. And so he started telling me about Wim Hof, that he'd done his training and stuff like that, and he kind of gave me, which I sometimes feel bad about, but I don't think Wim would care. He just gave me his login details for this online course, and let me do it. So it was the 10-week course, and it was very, very, I don't know if eye-opening is the right word, mind-opening. It's a very visceral thing, the Wim Hof Method. Very kind of just really brings you into your body in a very, very intense way. So I started doing it. Started with the breath work, the cold exposure. It was one of the big reasons why I wanted to start to give it a go, because I was such a wuss with cold water, and it was just something I wanted to get over. And so did the 10-week course, started regular sea swims, started regular cold showers. And
that's part of the course. They say that you got to do this.
So the Wim Hof Method is
online thing.
Yeah. The Wim Hof Method is broken down into 3 things, 3 pillars is what he calls it. So it's the breath work, cold exposure, and mindset. And to be honest, the whole thing just really, again, I don't know the right way to put it, but even with the mindset stuff, he kind of just has such a very honest and speaks with a lot of integrity, but it's very matter of fact stuff. And his whole thing, or the biggest thing I always took from Wim Hof, was kind of just one of the things that he says, that you didn't arrive here by accident. You're like we are the product of thousands of years of evolution, and that for you as a human being to be here at this moment of time, humans as our ancestry went through so many things, overcame so many obstacles, achieved so much stuff, even outside of technology, which would be the biggest thing we might think of now, but just physically as human beings, mentally as human beings, for us to get to where we got to. And that now we're very disconnected from that. Now I would be, oh, Jesus, it's a bit cold in that water, I'm not going to get in. He's like, that's not how you were built. It's like, you are genetically designed to be able to do these things. You just need to tap back into it. And that's what he always says. He's like, I'm not anything special. He says, I'm willing to tap into this stuff. I was willing to get into freezing cold water. I was, willing to learn these breathing techniques and to like embrace this kind of stuff. And that was always just like jumped out at me, like, yeah, like we are so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. Yeah. And the course, the Wim Hof, the 10-week course is like pretty intense. You do some like pretty ridiculous stuff.
Oh, what?
So the
what's the most ridiculous thing?
But you get to do stuff like, you might do like 4 or 5 rounds of the breath work, and the breath work is intense, and then and that is included obviously with the breath retentions, and then at the 5th round of the breath work, where you're kind of like completely spaced out, you will hold your breath and try and do as many push-ups as you can and stuff like that without breathing, and this kind of like just pushing yourself in these kind of ways. But from that moment I felt like stronger, more conscious, more connected through that method. Really was amazing, like a bit of a life changing point. And Art Macart, one of the amazing male teachers in Dublin, he'd been away in Thailand at the time, and when he came home from Thailand, he'd been exploring this method as well. And Con Sheehan, another teacher here, he'd got into it. So the 3 of us had been kind of getting into it around the same time.
Did them 2 went as well?
Yeah, so then the 3 of us went over to the weekend with Wim.
Nice.
And going over, so it was advertised as a weekend with Wim, with another Wim Hof instructor being there as well. So going over, I was like, it's probably going to be, because it wasn't that expensive. It was maybe €250, something like that. It was, for what it was pretty cheap. Yeah. So I was like, he's probably going to be there like the first day, be like, oh, thanks for coming, guys. Like, good to see you all here. See you later. But it was literally as it was advertised. It was a weekend with him. It was on in his house, basically. No way. It was like the Wim Hof Center in Stroh, Amsterdam, or just outside of Amsterdam. But it's basically just his house. And the weekend was just with him. He was just telling us all his different stories, his outlook, his mindset, just a weekend with him. There was no structure. There was no it was just a long, rambling, amazing weekend. And he has his daughter, he has I think 4 or 5 kids, and they sort of like do a lot of the organization of the whole program or whatever. I don't know how you want to put it, because he is just
they do like the admin.
Yeah, he is just raw energy. It's the only way I could describe him. He is just raw, truthful energy. And so you can't expect him to stick to like a timetable or anything like that. And like, there'd be certain times of the weekend he'd have just talked for about 2 hours and just, he'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, let's do horse dance for 20 minutes, bit of breathing. Or someone would ask him a question, he would just be, not in a rude way, but it would just lead him off on this different tangent. Yeah. And his daughter would be there like, Wim, like Q&A means there has to be an A, like answer the kid's question. You're like, what was the question again? And but it was just amazing, like really, really amazing. And again, the whole thing that I got from that weekend was just this kind of like communal, tribal almost connection to the people around us. And I think that's really what he wants to kind of bring us back to, is this older, ancient way of being and existing. Not necessarily like going off and living in the Himalayas, but just to connect to these things that got us to where we were. where we are. The second night, I don't remember how long we were there for, but we went down, and something that I found amazing about him. I've been on certain trainings, and that there's be a distance between teacher and student, and there was just no distance. He was just walking around hugging people, patting people on the back. At the end of the first day, like, we all had accommodation organised, but he's like, if anyone doesn't have accommodation, like, just sleep on my couch, like, it's no problem. And he was like, come back in an hour, we're going to do a little kind of get together. And so we came back down, me, Art and Con built a fire. He has this little like fire pit. It was mostly Art, to be fair. Me and Con were pretty useless, but so we built a fire, and everyone kind of stood around the fire, and we did these kind of like sharing circles and like group meditations and stuff, and it was really, really powerful.
What were you sharing? Was that truth or dare?
So we would stand in a circle around the fire, and he has this like sharing stick, and it's just basically a big stick, and you pass the stick around, and when you have the stick, you just speak. Okay. So some people would tell something that they went through. Some people would just basically speak. But it was a very just beautiful communal kind of environment. It was really, really nice. Yeah. And
what was your sorry, Brian, I see what
I can't remember what I spoke. I spoke about my love for simplicity. That was the thing. Okay. And how that was what I really connected with what Wim is trying to get across. This like simplicity and kind of scaling back rather than looking to add on.
Was that your main takeaway from the whole weekend, would you say?
My main takeaway from that weekend was that kind of communal connection. Yeah. I just found that so powerful. Yeah. And a lot of people come to the Wim Hof Method from pretty hard times, hardships, struggles. It's a great healer, that method. And just seeing people being so open and honest but in a kind of it was in a kind of tribal, communal way. It was beautiful that weekend. Really, really loved it.
It's like that approach to sharing is, yes, it is, you are showing vulnerability, but you're also showing real strength, isn't it? Yeah. And you're getting instant feedback from people who can comfort you and say, oh, I understand what you mean. I think there's a massive issue at the moment in society. I can only refer to the society I live in, but of people living more individualistic lifestyles, living on their own, or commuting on their own, and just because we don't need each other as much, through technology. And I think that's having really detrimental effects. I mean, I remember years ago, I was telling someone about this the other day. I actually looked at buying a house I think it's in Limerick, and it's a town. It's completely self-sufficient. It's an eco town, because I felt like the way my life was going, and pretty much has gone apart from really yoga, there's a loss of community. I mean, I don't know my neighbours around here. I know them just to say hello to, but I know nothing about them. I do know a lot of people through social media, and that's really, I love social media, but there's something about that simple situation of being around a fire together and sharing like that we don't do enough of, and I think it's really, really powerful in terms of, because I mean with the Wim Hof Method, it's I mean from a superficial level, it's about breathing on a superficial level. So what would you say is not the relevance, but why is breathing important in yoga? Say when you teach a workshop, what do you say? Because I've been to your workshops, I've been to your breathing classes. If I was to say, you stop the average person on the street and say, do you want to come along to this class where you sit down and breathe? They would think it's peculiar. Yeah. So what do you say is like why is it important?
Well, it's possibly the most like important physiological function in our body, breathing. Yeah, okay. I know. But so
involuntary breathing, obviously to stay alive. But why is conscious breathing important, do you think?
Well, so the kind of the there's two aspects to breath work as I say, a therapy, an approach to well-being. The first one is that maybe the breathing mechanism is broken, that you're breathing poorly, which affects everything from psychology to health to digestion to everything. If you're not breathing properly, your body's just not going to function properly, because because it is such an important function, not just to keep us alive. It's an underlying. We can very easily relate to breathing as just air coming in and out, but it's a full body process, breathing, if you're doing it properly. The second aspect of it is to breathe for a specific reason. And so in breath work specifically, as aside from yoga, in breath work there's the belief that your breathing kind of underlies everything. So for every emotion, every feeling, every energy, there's a reciprocal breathing pattern. So the simplest one to kind of like understand is that if you breathe into your chest or breathe into your shoulders, if you breathe high in the body, that is a sympathetic way of breathing. You're breathing with the secondary muscles of respiration, which are really only designed to be used if you have to like fucking sprint away from a tiger, if you like have to react. But if you breathe there habitually, you're gonna always be in this sort of like fight or flight mode. And that if you can't change that breathing pattern, it can be very hard for someone to meditate if they can't breathe properly. It can be very hard for someone to feel relaxed after a yoga class, or feel relaxed in a yoga class, if they're not breathing properly. So to understand the relationship between your breathing and everything else is like really, really, really important. Because I think most of us don't pay attention to our breathing. And with the world that we live in, which is not like the most amazing thing for our nervous systems, like full stop, that if we're not conscious of these things, it can just kind of get away from us. And so that's when I teach breath work, or even I try to teach quite breath focused classes. My purpose, or my intention, or my hope anyways, is just to begin to build like a kind of a deeper relationship with your breathing. Understand the connection to it, understand how it links to your physical sensations, understand how it links to your physical way of holding yourself, understand how it relates to your mental state, how it relates to your reactions. And it's Dan Brule, who is like one of the most amazing breathwork practitioners, coaches, so he says that there's so much of our body which is important to keeping us alive, we can't control. Like we can't really control our heartbeat, we can't really control how we digest our food. You know, we can impact these things with what we feed ourselves and stuff like that, but we can't kind of consciously be like, okay, we're going to physically do this. But and your breathing will happen. You don't have to think about your breathing, but you can consciously think and change your breathing. And he says that isn't like an accident, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to pay more attention, to draw inwards that little bit more. And I think it is this incredible key, door, or like gateway into, again, like a deeper listening, a more understanding of what's going on, which I think is like so important. And it's sometimes the simple things get forgotten about, but simple things are key. Simplicity is always the key.
There's I was talking to my sister recently, and she does yoga quite regularly, but she said that she finds in a vinyasa class, standard public vinyasa class, although vinyasa is supposed to mean movement with breath, sometimes the teacher won't necessarily cue that, or you get so caught up in making certain shapes that you don't really lead with your breath. So she was talking about how maybe starting Qigong, is it Qigong? And how that is more focused on on breathing with movement. But the Qigong is, am I saying it correctly? Qigong?
I think so.
Yeah, we know what we're talking about.
Great.
Yeah, I first heard of that by listening to Max Strom on A Life Worth Breathing.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that book? Yeah,
he's awesome.
Oh my god, he's so good. But he talks about a lot of the book is about breathing, and he talks about how even in in Hawaii, for example, aloha means the breath of God. So that's how people greet each other. Originally saying like the breath of God instead of hello, I think we've become, as you said, your breath affects your emotions. It affects how you feel, and we don't pay any attention to it. But when you first go to a class, I remember when I first started going to yoga, teacher saying breathe. I'm thinking I am breathing, but I'm not breathing consciously and understanding how it affects my body. I think that's massively important.
It's something which I try to focus on a little bit more as well, is that sometimes with yoga, if this is kind of a common misconception that a bigger breath is a better breath, and that like if you kind of just say, oh, like, because I've noticed it sometimes as well, if I say, okay, take a slow breath in, people will kind of instantly just kind of go and so to actually kind of encourage people to breathe a tiny bit less and a tiny bit more gently is actually more beneficial. So it's sort of a tricky thing, I think, to try and incorporate into a class, to include all these different things. But if you can sort of teach breath with the movements that you're making is kind of important, rather than just to sort of like, okay, and breathe, or stuff like that. That what I try to do is in certain poses to encourage people to breathe into certain parts of the body. So like breathe slowly down into the ribs, or in a forward fold to breathe into the back of your body, and stuff like this, which kind of opens up a whole new aspect to your breathing, rather than just and breathe and exhale this or inhale there or whatever. But I mean, there's different focuses as well. I think an approach that isn't focused on breath work isn't necessarily awful as well.
But I think though, having a separate class where it's just breath work is so valuable, because people can move away from the aesthetic and they can focus on. I mean, they are training. They're doing a different practice training, but it's just with their breathing.
The breathwork classes have been a really nice thing to start teaching, because I think people are more open to it than you would possibly think. Same with the mindfulness classes and stuff like that. And I think these aspects of a yoga practice, which can get lost in the studio system if they're not encouraged. And same thing, like I know so many people who before even starting yoga would never have paid attention to their breathing. They would never have understood the benefits of deeper breathing or anything like that. So it's a beautiful thing to see people begin to open up into and explore, because for me personally now anyways, if I obviously would never have to, but if I had to choose between the physical practice and the breathwork practice, I would choose the breathwork practice every time. Because I think, and when you understand breathing as this kind of full body process, you can feel looser after a breathwork session than you can feel after an intense stretching session. And obviously there's every person, there's a wide variance. Some people need to open up their body to be able to breathe a bit better. Some people need to breathe a bit better to be able to open up their body. There's no one size at all approach, but breathwork is such a beautiful practice to include and to focus on.
How do you see this, like, in terms of because you teach obviously vinyasa classes, you teach restorative as well, right? You teach breathwork classes, you teach on the teacher training at YogaHub. What's the next thing for you? Are you going to expand, because you have that on Facebook, the breathing club? Are you looking to expand the breathing movement, or what's kind of next for you in terms of your evolution?
Well, I think yeah, breath focus stuff is definitely my main interest. Even teaching vinyasa classes or flow classes, I always try to make it all underpinned by breath work and by breathing. But I don't like to think too far ahead at the same time. I'm not too sure where it would go, but it would definitely be. Yeah, I just think it's so important, and I think it's a kind of a natural evolution as well. I think, a lot of people like myself would have purely been focused on stretching to begin with, and like you're saying, the breathe, but I am breathing, or not really understanding that kind of concept. But I think the more you develop and the more you open up and the more your practice changes, I don't think you can look past breathing or breath work, because it is everything. Like it's so important. And I think even people who maybe won't teach breath work or won't overly promote the focus on breathing, even the people with high level practices in any physical discipline will understand that connection with your breathing and your physical practice, whatever it is. So yeah, in terms of like moving forward, it would definitely be, I would love to teach more breathwork classes. I think it always will be kind of my focus from going forward.
What about retreats? Like, essentially doing like similar to what Wim Hof did, campfire, a Wicklow or something.
I'm actually doing a retreat in September.
You're hosting a retreat
in Spain.
Nice one. Is that your first one?
Yeah, and it'll be a breath focus retreat.
Yes, cool. This September?
This September, yeah.
Exciting.
15th, something like that.
Yourself and...
No, so it's a company got in touch with me.
Oh, man.
They host retreats.
Yeah.
And they asked me would I be interested in doing one. So
hey, man.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Over to Cadiz in Spain. And so it's nice. It's going to be like it's a yoga retreat, but the focus will be on pranayama and breathwork and stuff like that. So it's going to be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Nice one, man. Yeah, I think that's massive. Like, an excuse to get people together, and get in touch with themselves and each other. There's actually a chap on Instagram called Jody Kennedy. I think Jody Kennedy. Another shout out. He does like these rewilding thing. You know him?
I know Jody. Jody's he's friends with my older sister.
Okay.
Yeah, I know Jody a while.
His brother's his brother does 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. He does a lot of jiu-jitsu as well, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah. He does all the movement stuff. Yeah. But like rewilding men, and so it's like men carrying rocks up mountains and stuff and doing and he does they're wrestling, grappling each other and stuff. And I think that is it's just so interesting to see that movement towards going back to
I think it's important.
Simplicity.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of natural. Like there's even stuff like, I don't know what they call themselves. I think it's like Girls Gone Wild. Seen those guys? They go out on like hikes.
Yes,
and stuff like
Barry,
that. And I think there will be kind of like a natural progression or regression back towards that kind of stuff, because it's so important.
Yeah.
It is how we got to where we are as human beings, being able to interact and communicate, and the sense of the community or the tribe, which it's kind of ingrained in us. It's nice, and breathwork is a really nice thing to kind of again, Dan Brule, he says that so like plants and trees, that they have this like physical connection with the earth, and so they don't really lose their connection. They stay, as a part of nature, whereas we don't really have that connection. And so for us it's kind of easier to get disconnected and lost, but that your breath is actually that connection. Like your breath is what kind of like makes you, or your connection to this sea of energy. And even what they say in yoga, that pranayama is the bridge to the universe, the kind of ultimate one of existence. And I think it can be a beautiful thing. Like sometimes in the breathwork classes you've been to, when you have a room of people just breathing together in these ways, it's really powerful. Like it's really amazing.
It is. All right, man.
Okay.
That was great. So I suppose we'll sign off by saying thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
And check out Brian's retreat in September. Is it available to book online?
I think I'm so bad with stuff like this.
Yeah,
like,
where would they look? If they...
So I think it's like Alamo Retreats is the name of the company. But I will have stuff up on like Facebook and Instagram in the like coming weeks probably. It's actually not that far away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of useless when it comes to like promotion and organisation. I kind of
let it happen organically.
Yeah, it'll just happen. Yeah. If you're there, I'll see you.
Okay, cool, man. Nice one.
Awesome.
That's
it.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please, as always, leave me a review on iTunes. I'd really appreciate it, particularly if it was 5 stars. If you have anyone that you would like to hear as a guest on the podcast, also let me know. And I'd be delighted if you would share it with your friends, family, and loved ones. All right, have a great week. Bye.